What's going on? This is Theo Gremminger, aka the OG Fantasy, back at it again. Week 8 fantasy sleepers. That's right, it's week 8. Season is flying by. We survived by Mageddon. We've been grinding the waiver wire. We've been getting our fantasy teams right, and hopefully we're set up for success in the second half of the season and in these fantasy playoffs. And I'm recording this on Friday, and I'm watched the game just like you guys did. Buffalo beats Tampa Bay. Gabe Davis balls out. Chris Godwin catches a touchdown pass. Mike Evans gets that late touchdown catch. You have Dalton Kincaid's season, which was just awesome to see. But what kind of stands out to me is Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir last week catches 4 passes for 35 yards, a slight uptick, and I missed him. I didn't put him in the waiver wire column. I certainly didn't have him on this show sheet list. I could be like, hey, man, I was going to give you Khalil Shakir, but I recorded on Friday instead of Wednesday. But I didn't, and I should have seen this one coming. And I think it's kind of a lesson for all of us that when you start to see the usage increasing, don't take that for granted. Don't brush that aside and say the teams just kind of want to mix it up. Touches are earned by these NFL offensive coordinators, head coaches, offensive coordinators. The game plan that they put in specifically, it's about preserving their job as much as it is getting wins. So the talented players eventually rise to the top. Now, the usage can be frustrating, and you can deal with things like veteran deference and playing favorites, just like in any profession in life. But when it comes down to it, when NFL coaches start giving new players opportunities, we really need to pay attention. And there's a number of players on this list this week that maybe are not that exciting to hear, but they're ones that you really should think about getting and stashing. If you want to treat this video as a life preserver, dumpster dive to a start, a guy where you're maybe in a jam and you need to put somebody in your lineup, that's great. And certainly some of these guys I'm going to have to use in some spots. But I think this video, if you're doing it right and you're grinding the waivers, this is like a secondary waiver wire video where some of these stashes are guys that you're going to be able to grab ahead of your league mates, put them on your bench, whether you're in a sleeper league or a Yahoo league with open free agents, grab one of them. If you're in an FFPC or an NFFC league with secondary waivers that run on Saturday or Sunday morning, these are some of the guys that you might want to consider. But this is an interesting week. There was certainly not a whole lot at the running back position, but we have a number of quarterbacks who are somewhat interesting this week. So let's just dive right into it. Starting out at the QB spot, we're going to go Gardner Minshew. I mean, how could we not? Minshew magic, baby. Minshew is back. He's now passed for 300 passing yards in back-to-back games. I mean, Anthony Richardson, very disappointing, but Richardson, his season is over. And the Colts offense is now a Gardner Minshew offense. Last week, 4 touchdowns, including 2 rushing touchdowns. Can't expect that every single week, but Minshew is starting to come into his own. Indianapolis has like a pretty sneaky, tough schedule the next few weeks, but I think you have to treat Gardner Minshew as a mid QB2. And when you're a mid QB2 with the sort of upside he displayed last week, then you become a streaming option. So if I'm completely jammed at quarterback, I'm looking at Gardner Minshew in a few spots. I think he's a high-end QB2 moving forward, and you got to love it. He's a fun player to watch. He's certainly elevating a few of his pass catchers. Josh Downs, Michael Pittman get a bump up, and Jonathan Taylor gets 18 carries last week, finds the end zone. He's trending up as well. And how could we forget Zach Moss? I mean, there's some sneaky talent. It's also consolidated. Minshew is utilizing his top 2 receivers. It's a fun offense because it's an easy one for us to predict, and Minshew is one we can consider every single week moving forward. Another quarterback who I never talk about him because he's not really fantasy relevant is Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett this week, though, is interesting. He's been playing a little bit better. Pittsburgh coming off of a win against Los Angeles. Pickett in his career has never finished higher than quarterback 15 on the week. He's only thrown 2 touchdown passes in a game, I believe, once. And he's only thrown for 300 yards in a game one time in his career. And that was like super early into his rookie season. There was like a Buffalo game where Buffalo woodshedded them, but Pickett had like a bunch of, garbage time yards. But this week against Jacksonville at home, Pittsburgh is in a spot where I think Pickett's going to have to pass. Jacksonville is the second worst team in the NFL in terms of fantasy scoring for yardage let up. So they've given up 273 passing yards per game. That's second to only the Los Angeles Chargers. So if you're in a super flex league, go ahead, roll out Kenny Pickett. If you want to be bold, consider Kenny Pickett. I don't know if I'm that bold, but he makes this list. Mac Jones coming off of a 272-yard, 2-touchdown performance in Week 7 against Buffalo. So he's back on our radar. New England now faces Miami. You know that Miami's going to be putting the pressure on New England to play keep up. I think Jones is kind of sneaky. In Superflex, I'm perfectly capable of starting him. And if you're in like real quarterback problems, consider stashing Mac Jones, because next week he plays Washington. Washington had given up 300-yard passing games in 5 straight games. Last week gave 270 to Tyrod Taylor, which was his most in like a year and a half, 2 years. So Washington has been a very fantasy-friendly team against opposing QBs. So if you want to be 1 week early on a sleeper, go with Mac Jones. Final quarterback to discuss is Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is available in 97% of Yahoo leagues. And again, all of these players I'm listing on this video and in my sleepers article, which you should check out on playerprofiler.com, all of these players are available in 75% of Yahoo leagues or more, unless I list them as a shallow league ad. So Sam Darnold last year gets 6 starts at the end of the season for Carolina, wins 4 of them, comes to San Francisco this year when Brock Purdy was banged up. And there was like some whispers that Shanahan would even consider Darnold as a starter. That did not happen, but Darnold is in a great spot to fill in for Brock Purdy while Purdy's on the concussion protocol. Like, Darnold's 26 years old. It's weird. He seems like he's 36 years old. It seems like he's been in the league forever, but he's 26 years old, played pretty well last year to end the year. He obviously gets boosted by the San Francisco offensive skill position players, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. Debo's going to miss another game, but even so, it's still considerably strong offensive skill position players in San Francisco. Running back-wise, Devin Singletary. I talked about him in my waiver wire column. He was a top 3 waiver wire ad for me this week, and that's because I think there could be a changing of the guard in Houston. The Devin Singletary, Dameon Pierce split is something we really want to monitor with them coming off a bye week. This week, it's CJ Stroud versus Bryce Young, Houston against the Carolina Panthers. And in week 6, Devin Singletary, he saw like a big uptick in usage. Season high, 58 rushing yards. He also had 2 targets to Dameon Pierce's 0. He's been a much more efficient runner than Pierce had all season long. I think there could be a changing of the guard. And even if it's a split backfield, Devin Singletary is the one who is probably more fantasy friendly because he's the one who's going to get the targets. I think he could see an uptick in usage in the passing game for Houston. And Carolina has been absolutely abysmal against opposing backfields. They've allowed 9 top 24 weeks at the running back position. Again, 9 top 24 weeks at the running back position. That is wild for this time of year. Jerome Ford's back at practice, but if he's unable to go, Pierre Strong is interesting. Pierre Strong is available in 88% of Yahoo leagues. Strong is like a dart throw play, but he's explosive and athletic. And I think Kareem Hunt's going to see a boost either way. And Kareem Hunt looks really good. But Kareem Hunt's 28 years old. Kareem Hunt can't be a guy that's going to get like bell cow usage. Again, if Jerome Ford can't go, then Pierre Strong would just be like a lottery ticket stash. But if Ford misses, Strong, you can consider him on this list. Shallow league guy, Emari DeMercado, Season high 17 touches in week 7 against Seattle. 5 targets were also a season high for him. Week 6 was very disappointing for DeMercado. It was completely disappeared, had like 3.5 PPR points. But this week was completely back. So we've seen 2 out of the last 3 weeks, DeMercado get like decent usage. This week against Baltimore is a difficult one, but if you're in a complete jam, based on DeMercado's ability as a pass catcher, I think he can be thrown in your lineup as like a flex RB3 type. Just has minimal upside against a tough Baltimore team that completely annihilated the Detroit Lions last week. But they did concede 9 catches to Jahmyr Gibbs. DeMercado is certainly no Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's a capable pass catcher in this league. So take a look at him if you're in a jam this week at running back. Royce Freeman, still available in 77% of Yahoo leagues. Darrell Henderson had 57% of the snaps, found the end zone, but Freeman also played well. He ripped off a few carries over 10 yards. He also had a couple of 9-yard carries. So he looked explosive. The Dallas Cowboys defense poses a challenge to Rams running backs, but I think Royce Freeman's another like 10 carry guy this week. I think if you're in a complete jam and you understand that this is a floor play, like Royce Freeman's going to get 10 carries. I think that they've got to use him to kind of soften up Dallas. You cannot run Darrell Henderson into the ground. He's only been back for like a week despite his strong play. Chris Rodriguez, this is your stash. Go ahead and grab him a week early because if he pops, he's going to be a big waiver wire addition. Right now, he's third fiddle to Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. But last week, Rodriguez led Washington in rushing yards. It was only 31, but it still led them in rushing yards. This is an Eric Bieniemy favorite. Washington was completely shut down against the New York Giants. They might go with a little more Rodriguez than some people think. Wide receivers, some fun names on this list. Shallow leagues, Josh Reynolds. He's available in 62% of Yahoo leagues. He's been quiet the last 2 games. Had only 43 receiving yards this past week. Season low for him. But again, Baltimore shut down Detroit. This feels like a big bounce back week for all Lions, including Reynolds. There's going to be a lot of love for Jameson Williams. We all want to see a lot of people want to see a Jameson Williams big breakout game, and this could be it. But Josh Reynolds could be the secondary receiver after, the Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. There's still going to be room for another Lions pass catcher to find the end zone this week. It could easily be Reynolds. He's played very well this season. Another shallow league ad is Rashid Shaheed. Saints offense starting to heat up. Derek Carr's passed for 300 yards in back-to-back games. Shaheed's seen an uptick in volume. Last week's loss to Jacksonville, he had only 32 total yards, but he had 8 targets, and he also had rushing attempts. So they're manufacturing touches for Shaheed. He's got big playability and speed. Exciting spot start against the Indianapolis Colts. Demario Douglas. Douglas is available in 98% of Yahoo leagues. I went out and got him in a bunch of waiver wires this year. I don't understand why the market, besides Player Profiler, where Douglas was a top 10 ad for us this week, I don't understand why people are so quick to dismiss him. He's one of the better skill positions on New England already, skill position players on New England already. And he has coming off a game where New England beats the Buffalo Bills. Demario Douglas finishes with 74 total yards. He gets a 20-yard rush, and he gets like 6 targets. So he's got some juice. He's got some momentum, and he's got a role that I think is going to be pretty established in a couple weeks. So go ahead, grab yourself some Demario Douglas. I think he'll be a hot waiver wire pickup next week, but he should have been picked up in more leagues this week. So that's the one. Go out and grab him. Stash him on your benches if you don't want to use them. If you're completely jammed, the game flow could make Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas both a little bit more interesting than in most weeks because Miami's going to put the pressure on New England to play keep up. We'll stay with rookie wide receivers. Jalen Hyatt, available in 94% of Yahoo leagues. The New York Jets have been an absolute nightmare to go against for opposing wide receivers, but Jalen Hyatt is starting to trend up in usage. He had a season high with 5 targets last week. He had 2 big catches. Hyatt has the speed and big playability that if the Giants are going to start utilizing him, he becomes interesting. Like, I've wanted to make Wan'Dale Robinson a thing for weeks. It just hasn't happened. Darius Slayton isn't happening. And the Giants need speed and they need playmakers. Go ahead and stash Jalen Hyatt. Another player available in 83% of Yahoo leagues is Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed now has 3 touchdown catches on the season, caught one last week. His volume makes him a difficult player to trust, but he has a couple factors going for him this week. Christian Watson's dealing with a knee injury, and Green Bay also faces off against a very generous Minnesota secondary. I think this could be a week where you see Jaden Reed make a Lambeau leap after he scores another touchdown. And if Christian Watson misses, then Jaden Reed becomes very interesting because he could get up to like 7 targets. And, you know, he's a guy who has been performing pretty well on a per touch basis. One more wide receiver, and this is only for deep league managers, but if you're in like an NFFC or an FFPC league and you want a $1 ad that could be trending up, it's Brandon Powell, and that's Minnesota. Brandon Powell had 6 targets last week in Minnesota's big win over San Francisco. KJ Osborne has kind of disappointed. He had a massive opportunity when Justin Jefferson was sent to the IR, and it's been sort of like Brandon Powell getting the same sort of target share as KJ Osborne recently, and Brandon Powell seems to be trending up a little bit. So Kirk Cousins is playing very well, and look for Brandon Powell to potentially have another week where he sees like 6 targets or more. This is a big game for Minnesota. Minnesota started off the season extremely slow. A win over Green Bay would go a long way for them, getting them to 500. Talk about tight ends. Fun week for tight ends. I got 3 of them, all young players. We love that. We don't like, I've had a bunch of weeks on here where I've had to talk about guys like, Tyler Conklin, Gerald Everett. This week, it's back with the younger players. Trey McBride, he's still available in 85% of Yahoo leagues. I think this is a big mistake by Yahoo managers. Trey McBride now has a chance for a weekly role that could put him as a low-end tight end 1. He's already outproduced Zach Ertz for 2 straight weeks. He had 11 targets these past 2 games. He's caught 7 of them. And now Zach Ertz is headed to the IR with a quad injury. Zach Ertz could also get traded at the trade deadline, but Trey McBride has this tight end room all to himself. Arizona used a second-round pick on McBride in the 2022 NFL Draft out of Colorado State. Mega producer at Colorado State. But McBride was like a slow starter as a rookie. Now, in his second season, is finally getting the opportunity. Like, it makes sense for Arizona to establish McBride as their long-term answer at the tight end position. He also gets Kyler Murray coming back sooner than later. So there's a lot to like with McBride. If he's available in your league, definitely go pick him up. Another tight end I'm a big fan of is Michael Mayer. He had a disappointing output in Week 7's loss to Chicago, but the Raiders' offense stalled out. Brian Hoyer behind center. Mayer had only 2 catches for 13 yards, but if you recall, 2 weeks ago, he was kind of the talk of my waiver wire article and a number of waiver wire articles out there because he had 5 catches for 75 yards in the big win Vegas had over New England. Now, Mayer should get Garoppolo back, and they're playing a Detroit Lions defense that's been a funnel for fantasy points for opposing tight ends. So if there's like a big weak spot for the Baltimore Ravens, it is against opposing tight ends. Last week, Mark Andrews had 2 touchdown catches against that Lions defense. Could Mayer have one this week? I'm not sure, but I do think the usage is going to ramp up. And one more player who's been extremely disappointing, but is available in 73% of Yahoo leagues, and that's Chig Okonkwo. He's been a major disappointment this year. This was a guy that we looked at as a potential breakout. The DeAndre Hopkins trade did not help him, but he still couldn't even get it going with Treylon Burks missing. So Chig's had multiple opportunities. He even had a 9-target week, and nothing really came from it. But Okonkwo heated up in the second half of last season. Maybe that's his path this season. Maybe the quarterback change to Will Levis could be beneficial to Chig Okonkwo. I don't know. There's something about it this week where Tennessee's playing Atlanta. There's potential change in the air at Tennessee where guys like Derrick Henry potentially Hopkins. I don't think he's going to get moved, but you could see some movement with the Tennessee skill position players. This could be a game for Okonkwo to start getting it right. Again, he's available in a lot of leagues. Won't cost you anything because the production has absolutely not been there. Appreciate you tuning into this video. Check out my waiver wire video that I drop every week. I drop that on Tuesdays. Check out my 2-minute drill video that I drop on Mondays. The 2-minute drill is my biggest fantasy takeaways on the season. Check out my episode of First Class Fantasy. I co-host First Class Fantasy with Billy Muzio. That shows every Thursday. I had Ryan Reynolds of the 33rd team on this week. Went over a bunch of start sits. And check out my press coverage with Andrew Erickson that I actually recorded on Friday, the same day I'm recording this. Andrew Erickson of Fantasy Pros, great guest. That show was really, really, really fantastic. And check out the crossover work we're doing with the 33rd team. I had a chance to podcast with Josh Larkey and Ryan Reynolds over at the 33rd team. And I had Ryan Reynolds again on this week. We're doing some very cool crossover stuff with them. And look for a few more VODs, this video on demand content that I'm putting out. I'm going to have a couple special ones, maybe a trade deadline one coming up that should be pretty cool. Stick with us here at Player Profiler. We've got you covered. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button to this video. Absolutely helps us out. And make sure and check out the article version of this video as well at playerprofiler.com. Let's crush it this week. Let's get some W's. Let's win some championships this year. And have a great